Hi, everyone. We'll get started with the office hours right at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Hey, Gerardo, how are you?
Good, I just unmuted myself.
Good morning, this is John Markovic of BJA. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor managing the body-worn camera program. We'll start in a few minutes. This is the optional office hours. We have our two state policy advisors on the line to answer your questions regarding the administration of your grant. We'll start shortly at 11 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Markovic. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and I manage the body-worn camera program. With me today are the two state policy advisors, and I don't know if Flora is on the call as well, but the two state policy advisors, three state policy advisors are Gerardo Velasquez, Tamara White, and Flora Lawson. And they're the individuals who manage the administrative portions of your grant. So if you've been working on budget finalizations, on getting special conditions cleared, including the special condition related to the body-worn camera policy, they're the folks that you've been dealing with. With this grant, the TTA provider, CNA, who also has representatives on the call, is really responsible for shepherding the special condition with regard to the policy clearance, either working with you through the policy scorecard to make sure you have a comprehensive and deliberate policy in place, or making sure that you submit the self-certification for the comprehensiveness and deliberateness in your policy development. So this is really an open session for those of you who have questions about grant administration. Any questions you have about your grant, if they're not related to grant administration, we can probably try to answer them here. We, again, have CNA representatives on the call. So with that, I will open it up to questions. And Eliana, I don't know if we've got any that have come in yet. Doesn't look like anything's come in on the chat.
We don't have any that's coming in the chat, John. This is Brittany, but I have a couple that we do have that I'll start with. And then if anyone does have questions, please put them in the chat and we can make sure we read those out loud to our state policy advisors.
Thanks, Brittany. And I should have allowed the state policy advisors to introduce themselves.
Sure.
So
Yep.
let's start with Gerardo, and then Tamaro, and then Flora.
Ladies first, Tamaro, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tamara White, and I currently manage a very small portion of body-worn camera awards as I'm transitioning out, but I've been with the program for a couple years now, with BJA for about 24 years now.
Thanks, Tamara.
I'm not sure if Flora's coming on, but my name is Gerardo Velasquez. I've been with BJA for over 23 years, and I handle most grants from I to Z.
So those are the state names, and then Gerardo has been on the project since its onset in 2015. And Tamaro joined us, as you said, a couple years ago, handling essentially states A through G. And Flora has been working with her and will be taking over her cases. They're in the transition period now. So some of you may have communicated with them already on budget clearances and approvals, on clearing special conditions. And again, CNA sort of does the front end of working with you on your scorecard or on your policy self-certification. Once they do that, they pass it on to me, and 99 times out of 100, once it's cleared the hurdle with CNA, meaning that you've developed a deliberate and comprehensive policy with broad stakeholder input, I just pass those on to either Gerardo, Tamara, or Flora to say that that condition's been cleared. There may be other withholding conditions that exist, budget finalization, you may be delinquent in reports and so forth, but that clears that one condition of the several conditions that are on the grant. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brittany, for some questions.
Thanks, John.
Good morning. I'm sorry. This is Flora. Can you hear me? I'm having some type of technical difficulties. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Flora Lawson. I've recently been reassigned to the body-worn camera program a couple of months ago. I manage states from A. Well, previously I was managing states from A through D, and now since Tamaro is leaving us, I will be reassigned her award. So it's nice meeting you all. Sorry for the confusion.
That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you all. The first, again, please everyone, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. This is the time to get all of your burning questions answered, or when your site teams tell you, please ask your state policy advisor. This is an opportunity where we have them all three available to you, and you can ask those questions. One of the first questions we have gotten and that we often get is, what is the body-worn camera toolkit, and what can it be used for?
Okay, let me handle that one. The body-worn camera toolkit was essentially a compilation of resources that was compiled by BJA at the outset of the grant. So it really contains a lot of documents about just really everything related to body-worn cameras, research papers, position papers, and policies that are publicly shared by agencies. The toolkit is probably going through some revisions now, so consider using it in tandem with the body-worn camera TTA website, which has a lot of the same resources, and then it has the direct links to the content that CNA our primary TTA provider compiles. We're working on streamlining and really kind of conjoining those two websites. So you can look at both of them. The TTA website right now is probably more comprehensive, and I'll post those links momentarily in the chat.
Thanks, John. I just put the one for the body worn camera toolkit in the chat, but does anyone else, before I kind of go to the next question that we're frequently asked, have questions? You can feel free to use your reaction button to raise your hand, and we can unmute you if you'd prefer to just ask your question as opposed to typing it in the chat. Okay, the next question that we've gotten is, where can we find the training and guidance on award management?
Okay, I'm sorry, I was trying to paste the link, and I'm also tracking questions here, so I apologize. I think, well, I'll post that link in a moment, sorry. I'm just looking through some of the responses I have ready for these questions. So the grant financial guidance management would be the tool for that, and I'll post that as well. Just so hopefully that answers the question.
Also, a great resource is the DOJ Financial Guide, which is on our website at ojp.usdoj.gov.
Thank you, Tamara. I was searching for another answer. That's the better answer. Thanks.
Thank you. And I see Gerardo just put that in as well in the chat for everyone. I'd like to go to the question that we often get around budgeting for travel. So a number of sites budgeted for travel in the grant, but the national meeting is virtual. What are some options for spending that money?
I'll start out there and then the SBAs can chime in. I think, yeah, we did not require it in this, well, we've required it in the past, and I think some people reapplying assume that the body worn camera meeting was going to be required, and we were a little up in the air with COVID, so we decided to do it virtually. So if you've budgeted money for sending people to DC or some other site that you might have used as a placeholder, those funds can be repurposed. They can be repurposed for any really allowable costs related to body worn cameras. So you can get additional cameras. You can maybe bring on additional staff or support staff, reassignment to certain activities to relate your body worn camera program. Pretty much it's fairly open-ended, and you work with your state policy advisor if necessary to submit a GAN. It depends on how much the change is. If it's under 10%, that's generally allowable. It's always a good idea to consult with your state policy advisors, though, when you're making changes to the budget. But there are some provisions and allowances of wiggle room in budgets that are under 10% of your total budget amount. Gerardo, tomorrow, Laura, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, as you stated, John, there are some instances where a grant award modification is a GAN now, not a GAN, is required, especially if you are moving costs in between categories and you're moving costs to a category that was not previously approved. So at any time when you are making modifications to your budget, it's just always a good idea to check in with your state policy advisor.
And I think while we're on the subject of GAMs, formerly known as GAMs, I think I got that right. One of the things that we hold applicants or awardees up to is the body worn camera metric, when you applied for your grant, you were allowed up to $2,000 to request in federal funds per body worn camera. So if you requested 100 body worn cameras, your cap on the federal award was $200,000. Now, if you were to come and say, oh, well, we changed our mind and we only need 75 cameras, in fairness to other grantees who adhered to that cap, we can't allow you to move funds to something else. So your award in that case, if you were only getting 75 cameras after intending to get 100, would be $150,000. So $2,000 times 75. That's basically in fairness to other applicants. We've maintained the cap if you're reducing the number of cameras. If you came in under the cap, let's say you requested 100 cameras, but only requested $150,000 in federal funding, you go down, you decide you only need 75, your $150,000 would still be allowed because it's in line with what the cap would have been had you applied originally with 75 cameras. I know that's a little confusing, and it's fairly unique to the body-worn camera program, but since it is principally about body-worn cameras, we hold you to that cap.
Any follow-up questions to that about the number of cameras in the cap? I know that many of our sites have had questions about that over the last couple years and some of our new sites. So does anyone have follow-up questions? I'll just give you a couple seconds to raise your hand, maybe if you do.
You know, I will chime in there. I think on a related note, the technology is evolving, and I know there are agencies that are interested in and agencies that have applied for essentially bundling their body-worn camera programs with in-dash camera programs. There's a variety of ways that the vendors have set that up, and that's certainly allowable. However, again, this is a body-worn camera program, so the metric for the $2,000 per camera applies to body-worn cameras. So if you can fit in the cost of in-dash cameras within the cap, multiply it by the number of body-worn cameras, you're fine, but you don't use in-dash cameras in the multiplication of your cap. So everyone was held to that standard when we did the peer review and the awards were processed. So I don't think that's a problem with anybody, but if you were to do a GAM, you cannot use the in-dash cameras in your calculation to calculate your cap.
Thanks, John. The next question that we have often gotten from our sites this year and as well as previous years is around city contracts. So if the city has a contract with the BWC vendor from previous body-worn camera rollout, the amount will exceed $250,000. Are there special things that need to be done to continue with the contract?
Yes, so
Go ahead, Tamara. No, you go first.
So if there's an existing contract and the applicant or the grantee would like to extend or buy additional cameras in addition to what was already contracted for, and it exceeds $250,000, they would have to come in for a sole source approval, and that's done in JustGrants through a grant award, a modification. John, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just would echo that and just say that we do have a presentation at 3 o'clock this afternoon as part of the overall presentation with Michael Williams, who's with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer for OJP, the umbrella organization that sits over BJA and other grant making agencies, and he'll reiterate essentially what Tamara said. There are some stipulations for sole source, but I think the fact that you're continuing with an existing vendor kind of gets you pretty far along that path of sole source. You just need to provide the justification to the SPA.
Mhm.
The basic thing is that when you spend your awards, you should be doing that wisely, and it should be competitive and cost effective and related to the project. So I think in 90% of the cases, that's pretty clear justification for sole source, but you need to work through your SPAs just to make, if it's over $250,000, to make sure that's all aligned and proper.
Gerardo, tomorrow, John or Flora, anything else you want to add about sole source? I know that is a question we get, or situations we get into a lot from our TTA teams. Any comments about that?
Add that the grantee needs to follow their procurement policies and procedures and also our financial guide.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gerard. I think that's another thing Michael Williams will address this afternoon is oftentimes your local procurement rules are even stricter than the federal rules. So you need to abide by those as well and be familiar with those.
And there is an outline laid out in the DOJ financial guide. I would just recommend that when you do, if there is a situation where a sole source would be justified, follow that outline exactly as it is laid out in the DOJ financial guide. That will save you some time, as well as just provide as much information and a robust response to each one of those points as you can, and that will as well, because oftentimes those sole source approvals can be a very lengthy process, and many times it's because the justification was not thorough enough and it wasn't detailed enough.
Thank you. I did receive a couple questions in our chat. The first one is around allowable expenses. Are licenses and cloud storage fees allowable expenses?
Yeah, they are, and the cloud storage is allowable this year. And last year, there was an issue, the appropriations for the appropriation language, the budget appropriation language in previous years had put some restrictions on storage. We're not exactly sure why that was or the rationale was, but luckily in 2021 that was lifted. So matching funds or federal funds can be used for storage. And we know that's a major cost driver. I think for those of you who have been dealing with vendors, they're kind of moving away from the a la carte. You pay for the cameras, you pay for storage, to bundled services, what some call software as a service, or what one vendor calls video as a service, where essentially you pay X amount per officer, per camera, per month, and that kind of covers everything: the license, the camera, and then it generally, I think, includes for most vendors an upgrade of cameras, let's say at 18 months or 2 years. So everything with storage from 2021 on is green lighted.
I'm just scanning to see if anyone has their hand up before I go back to the chat. As a reminder, if anyone does have questions, please either put them in the chat or feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you. Another question that we have is, if I am a current grantee, can I still apply for grants next year or in future years?
Yes, absolutely. We do have, I think I alluded to it yesterday in my introductory remarks, or the session that Mike White and I did on the background of the BWC PIP program and the history. We do often have agencies coming back for supplemental funds. usually it's to expand their body-worn camera program. So several years ago, early on in the grant process, I think in 2015 or 16, LAPD applied for a grant, and then they came back a year or two later. They applied and were successful in a grant. They came back a year or two later to expand their program to transit officers who had not previously been issued body-worn cameras. So that was an expansion program. As you know from your applications, we really want you to indicate whether it's sort of a new program, you're doing a full or widespread implementation of body-worn cameras. Some agencies do pilot programs, which is becoming less common now as BWCs are more common and more states are mandating their use, and expansion programs. We do allow agencies to come in to replace equipment that is at the end of the life cycle, but in general, the new awards or the expansion awards are prioritized in the competitive grant process. But that's a lot, coming back for more awards is for additional funding for expanding your body-worn camera program is allowable. I should say too that for the 2023 solicitation, we added 3 new purpose areas that do not require the purchase of body-worn cameras. Up until then, although we want you to have full programs and we require you to have holistic programs with training and policy development, this award was predicated on the lease or purchase of body-worn cameras beginning in the solicitation that went out and is now going through peer review. We had 3 new purpose areas that really were intended for agencies that have established BWC programs, and we intend to have that again at the next grant cycle for the 2024 awards. The 2023 awards, where we would allow you to get funding for digital evidence integration projects for prosecutors who are dealing with more efficiently processing digital evidence from body-worn cameras and other related sources like in-dash cameras. And then for agencies that are using body-worn camera footage for constitutional policing, for training purposes. These are agencies that have shown some promise of ability with working with a body-worn camera footage, and will want to share that with others through demonstration projects. So that if you look at the FY 22 solicitation that closed in May, that's now going through peer reviews, it'll give you a good indication of what we're likely to fund again next year. And if I get a break in answering questions, I'll post a link to that solicitation shortly.
Thanks, Sean. Another question we have is if the grant award manager is not available to complete the reports, is there a way for the financial manager to complete them instead?
No, the only person that's allowed to complete programmatic reports is the grant award administrator. So they would have to work closely with that person to get, if they share like the passwords or, it has to be the grant award administrator to complete those.
Okay. I'm going to wait a couple seconds to see if anyone puts other questions in the chat or raises their hand before I go to the next question that was previously submitted. Oops. I see one person has raised their hand, Miss Leon, and I may have mispronounced your name wrong. So I'm going to ask you to unmute, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
No worries. Quick question. I kind of caught the tail end of potential like program expansions, making a department eligible for future grants potentially. Does that include if we wanted to outfit armed security officers? with body worn cameras?
So I'm posting that shortly. I think the program that you're describing, I think would fall under what's now Category 1. If that's administered by the law enforcement agency, it would be an expansion of your program. Would mean that, you know, let's say you got 50 body worn cameras for sworn personnel, and now you're going to expand that 22. I don't know, I forget the term that you use, the armed personnel. You know, we do support embedded within the law enforcement agency the expansion of cameras, or the use of cameras, assignment of cameras to school non-sworn personnel who perform some sort of law enforcement function. So those could be civilian investigators. It could be traffic enforcement personnel who are civilians. That is allowable under what in the 2022 solicitation was Category 1, which is our sort of traditional body worn camera lease or purchase for law enforcement agencies.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Let me just scan. I can't see everyone on one page, so I'm just going to scan really quick if anyone has their hand raised. One other question that did come in is, you mentioned a GAM or a GAN. What is that, and why would we need to submit those? Meaning, can you just clarify what a GAN or GAM is?
GAN is a grant award modification, and it could be for several purposes. One, to modify your budget. One, to get an extension on your grant, or a change of scope of the grant. Or Tamara?